Hi, welcome to those of us who are just joining. We'll get started in about a minute or two. Welcome to the 911 Systems webinar. We'll get started very shortly. The participants are loading in here. All right, guys, as you're joining us, feel free to use chat, say hello, let us know who you're with, and we'll get started in just a few seconds. All right, welcome to Rick from DCH SEMA. We have Dorothy from VDEM. Tony with Verizon. I think we have a few Verizon folks with us today. Welcome. And guys on the line, feel free to use chat, to continue to use chat to say hello, to ask questions. You might have some of your own solutions or thoughts. Good afternoon to EMA's here, headquarters. Anna from VDEM. All right, guys, so it's 4:01, so why don't we go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the All Hazards Consortium's 911 Systems, how COVID accelerated innovation in the 911 world. My name is Laura Johnson, and I am the Director of Conferences and Events for All Hazards. Just a few administrative remarks before we get started. First, we are recording today's presentation. We will send everyone a link post-event, so feel free to share that with your colleagues and peers. The more people that hear about the 911 systems and how they work and the future of the systems is better for us, so we'd love for you to share that. Also, feel free to use the chat, as I mentioned, to send a message. You can also use the Q&A for questions, and we will definitely save time for the end of today's webinar to get to any comments or questions that you have. Now I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Tom Moran. Tom?
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. This is a subject near and dear to my heart. I retired from Verizon in 2003. For those of us that are not in the 911 world, it's like electricity. You throw the switch, the power comes on, and we had no idea of how many people are involved to address that need. Same with the 911 call centers. People don't really know all the complexities behind that, the stress on the people that do these jobs, right? And today's a great example of how COVID accelerated innovation, as it did for many of us in the country. And this is specifically a public safety issue that affects all of us, right? Employers, employees, government, everybody. So I'm really, really glad we were able to pull this together. I want to thank our panelists for joining us. I think it'll be an eye-opener. It's a great use case on how government can innovate very quickly, but discover things along the way and address not only the technical issues, but some of the process policy issues that come along with this. And I think you're going to hear a lot more about this in the future, because the 911 centers are becoming data hubs and real-time information hubs. And we're looking at ways the private sector can help gain from that and benefit and push information to that as well. So thank you all for joining us. We're looking forward to our webinar. Laura, I'll turn it back to you and let's get rolling.
All right, sounds good. I have the pleasure of introducing today's panelists. So I'm going to introduce one by one. I'd love to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, but also give us some information about how the 911 system in your jurisdiction works. So let's start with Renee Gordon. She's the Director of the Department of Emergency and Customer Communication for the City of Alexandria. Renee?
Oh, thank you for having me here. So I've been in public safety for over 30 years, partly police officer and a director in a couple of different places. So when I talk about a 911 system, I'm talking about the whole thing. And it's not just the call center. It's, the processes that we do, police, fire, EMS, and the communication center and how that all connects together. And now we're doing things like a regional project that we have with Arlington, and I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but we're actually sharing a phone system, and that has been very successful.
Thank you so much, Renee. We also have Jeff Wobbleton, the Assistant Director of IT and Administration with the Alexandria Department of Emergency and Customer Communications. He works with Renee. Jeff, do you want to say hello?
Hey, shout out to everybody. Thanks to all my friends out there. I see a couple of people from the West Coast and the private sector. So I'm going to ride shotgun with Laura today and help out with the presentation. I think everybody's going to enjoy it. So turn it back over.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Thank you. And then we have Dave Mahalan, the administrator of the Arlington County 911. Dave?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on here. It's good to see some old friends on here from way, way back, and looking forward to the new friends that are made from this. I am the administrator for the Arlington County 911, and Renee has already described the environment. We are in a joint partnership with them for the 911 call taking system and exploring other partnerships. But in essence, the processes are very similar. We're well aligned, and we'll get more into detail about what those are and how they look a little bit different today than they did even 15 months ago.
Great, thanks, Dave. And then last but not least, we have Eddie Reyes, the director of the Prince William County 911. Eddie?
Thank you, Laura, for saving the best for last. No, all kidding aside, it's an absolute pleasure for me to be with on this panel with my dear friends, Renee, Dave, and Jeff. Same as Renee, over 30 years in the business between law enforcement and 911 communications. I think really the one thing that sets Prince William very much apart from the two other municipalities that are on this panel is just the complexity of multiple municipalities being within our county and then having to dispatch for up to 6 other municipalities for police and fire. So that makes, our job really complicated. And so, coming on CAD to CAD, that's going to be a topic I'm sure that we're going to be talking about down the road. So that's just it. Just wanted to give a brief introduction and so happy to be here.
Eddie, we're happy that you're here too, as well as all the panelists. Thank you so much. And Jeff, I think we did the math on the years of experience sitting on the panel today. I think it was close to 140 years of 911 and related experience. So pretty amazing. So as Jeff mentioned, we're going to tag team today. So Jeff, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Hey, thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's you know what I was just thinking about close to 130 to 140 years of experience that's sitting here. And I've known these three. I've probably known for quite a bit of time. So it's a it's more than a partnership, it's friendship. So I just want to say thanks to them for all the years. But one of the reasons why we're here is to talk about COVID and what did it do, what is it, what is the 911 center, and how did it evolve things. So, I still remember those long days and those nights and those phone calls from my dear friend Renee. And when she first called me, I said, what do you want to do? And I said, that's interesting. Not really, I said interesting. I said a bunch of other stuff. And then she said, make it happen. So that's the big thing that we talk about is, what happened during COVID? What made you change and what was it like inside? So Renee, I'll start with you. What was it like?
Wow, Jeff, thank you. So I have to say that we felt protected prior to this knowledge of COVID. We felt really protected in our little box. In our box, I mean that technology protected us from the big bad wolf on the outside world all the time, and all the work that we put into keeping our system safe. But the ghost of COVID walked in and really attacked a vulnerability that we didn't stress a lot, and that was our people. And that's the main thing that keeps our centers running are the people. And so when this vulnerability gets attacked, you have to think quick on your feet. It was unexpected. It really was. And all the things that we trained on as far as systems and technology just kind of went out the window, because now we had to shift that focus to how do we keep our people safe. And I think that we were very successful in that. And I think that we switched up quick. We were able to separate people quick. And it did help us to evolve into, something that we needed to do anyway. So the call taking that we started to do from home, we did a lot of planning on the spot. And I think that we did adequate planning within a month, and testing, and made this happen. And so we were able to evolve into, taking calls from home in no time. But it took us outside of this little box that we stay in, and we need to start looking at other ways to innovate.
Thanks, Renee. You're so true. Is that the people, the behind the walls. It's so important that we recognize them and look forward to taking care of them. Right?
Yeah.
Dave. So Renee touched on that just a little bit. Is that on the people side? What about what's currently happening now? What out of COVID, what are you taking forward?
Yeah, so listen, I know our title is how COVID is changing or driving innovation, but really when you look at it, as if COVID wasn't bad enough for us, it was COVID plus civil unrest plus some significant weather events. And I like to say, if this was a tabletop exercise and you had those three injects, people would leave because they would go, this is just ridiculous. These three things are not going to all happen at the same time, but it did, and it forced it. So here's the deal, right? The delivery of 911 services really is an unwritten compact that we have with the public, right? There is an expectation that no matter what, there's going to be this continuity of service. And so one of the things that COVID did for us is it really drove a conversation about, well, what level of service are we going to provide? And there were kind of three tiers, like what level of service is mandatory? What do we have to do? So we know we have to answer phones, right? And then what's critical, but not mandatory. And then that conversation of, hey, what could we do without in the worst case scenario? And of course, no one wanted to put anything on that list, right? No stakeholder that we had was willing to negotiate on anything, but there was a reality to say, maybe something happens that not all the staffing is here. We can't deliver everything that we've delivered in the past. So that was one thing. Renee touched on this. We've put so much thought and effort into the redundancy and resiliency of our centers from a technical perspective. And COVID forced us to consider the redundancy and resiliency from the human perspective. I'm thinking that, we put so much thought and effort in just doing the day-to-day business that we never thought had the creativity, what do they call it in the 9/11 Commission, the lack of imagination of what would happen if something took out 75% of our workforce, right? So we had to rethink how we do provide the services if something affects our people, but that's where the technology came back in, right? So, I love words that Renee has used in the past for what they did. And one of the words she uses, we were bold. We just did things bold. We did things differently. And that meant that we stepped way outside our comfort zone, which is not easy to do in public safety environments. One of the things, Jeff, COVID made us rethink risk, right? So we thought about risk in a different way. The stuff that Alexandria did with remote call taking, what we did following on that remote call taking, moving into remote dispatch, remote supervision. I'm sure people have told Renee also, you guys are crazy. There's a lot of risk in that. But what's the risk if you can't deliver the service? So at least I'm putting my risk into a controlled environment, because when I do this, I can kind of set the parameters versus if all of a sudden I don't have people, I'm in an uncontrolled risk environment. Then the last thing I would say, Jeff, is really kind of not like what drove it, but what was an important baseline in this is future growth is really critical to think about when you're procuring a system. And I know people fight just to get money to replace well, I need a one-for-one thing. But one thing that Renee and I benefited from was when we replaced our 911 systems with a joint 911 system, we both made investments into remote call taking equipment. And yep, when it hit March, that stuff was sitting on a shelf. And yes, there had been a lot of hallway conversations about someday we're going to use this stuff to fill in the blank, right? But at least we had the foresight to put it in, buy it, so that when it was needed, it was there. Got to tell you, we didn't do that with remote dispatch. And when we got to remote dispatch on our side, it was a lengthy, painful process to get something. There was no, it'll be here in 30 days and up and running. You know, so again, put the thought into it, future-proof your systems.
Hey, thanks, Dave. So, you know, the one thing, you have three leaders in the industry sitting in front of you. I'm going to introduce the last one here is Eddie, the trifecta in this national capital region, as I call him, is that, you know, Eddie's going through his, you know, he was doing some changes while he was going on there. And, you know, Eddie, what were you going through when this whole thing was going on?
You're on mute, Eddie.
Sorry about that. How about now? Thank you, Laura. Apologize. So Jeff, yeah, I mean, of course, COVID was never a perfect time for anyone. But for us, it caught us at a real disadvantage in that we had just finished renovating a backup center, actually building it from the ground up, because all it was a shell. So we had just renovated and built up our backup center. And we had been working out of there for just a few months when COVID hit, because our main center was completely dismantled. And so we were working out of a backup center. And like everyone else, I mean, one of the things, you know, that I really like that Dave and Renee have said is I really focused at that point we went into survival mode. I mean, come March of 2020, we totally went into survival mode because all of a sudden the technology and the renovation, that took a back seat to making sure that my people were safe and were going to be able to come to work. We, by the grace of God, survived COVID very well. I think I only had 2 exposures in the whole center during this whole time. But, you know, just the flexibility and the resiliency that we had to build into our people, just kind of things changing on the fly every single day with short notice. You know, the COVID related questions that we were asking our callers, because of course they were coming to us from higher levels, changed. Our final version was version 6. So we started with version 1 asking a certain type of question during COVID. And by the time it was over, by the way, we just had a meeting yesterday on dismantling the structured questions that we were asking during COVID. So up until yesterday, we were still asking the structured questions for COVID. But these are the changes. We'd come to work and suddenly this is your new set of questions that you're asking callers, even if they're calling in a towed car or a parking complaint, whatever the case is. We had a very structured set of questions that we were asking all callers that was completely out of the norm for us and was really prolonging the triage time of a routine call for service just because we had to go through all the COVID questions. And then of course, just the resiliency of our staff of having to be, you know, temperature checked and go through, you know, questionnaire every day that they came to work, and at the early stages, 2 times per shift. It was just, you know, a significant challenge, but we knew that we had to focus on keeping our employees safe and returning to work every day because the volume we knew was going to just start to increase.
Yeah, Eddie, that's a great analogy. You know, the one thing I'll steal this from my good friend Steve Souter. You know, the first of the first responders stepped up to the plate, so it was quite something. So, Laura, I'm gonna turn it over to you for question 2.
All right, thanks so much, Jeff. Dave, you said COVID made you rethink risk and it made you rethink the technology you were probably already thinking about. But if you can tell us a little bit more about the ongoing next gen projects you have and how you think they're going to change the emergency communications industry.
Yeah, so just a little bit of insight, especially when we talk about moving to the true next generation 911 and the EZNet. I'll tell you that it's been a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes when you're always pushing to be on, up front and up to date on everything. One of the things is we have a Vesta system. We went to Vesta 7.5 and found some challenge in being able to have that work efficiently, because with our EZNet solution provider, 7.2 is the only one that's certified to work. So we're actually in the process, again, jointly with Alexandria, rolling our system back. But listen, I mean, this is, I think, like, so COVID said, think differently and throw out everything you know, and be okay with the thought that sometimes things don't work the way that you want to work. So you have to rethink and redo things. And so, part of this is conceptually, we really don't know what the full-blown impact of NG 911 is. So, part of this is us just kind of like holding our breath and trying to get the fundamentals down right now. So, it's important that we learn to dribble the basketball before we do the slam dunk. But some of the things I think when I think about, so what difference is it going to make? From our practitioner side, we're really excited about the fact that it's going to bring a lot more data, and better data means better decisions, so better situational awareness. But then again, we have to worry about, like, how are we going to handle this tsunami of data that's coming in? So, when I look, I know we have a lot of industry partners on this call. When I look from the industry side, what's their impact and what do we need from them? And I don't think staffing levels are going to inherently go up just because we have new technology. So we're going to look to technology and in the solution providers to help us. I'm thinking about things like augmented intelligence and artificial intelligence, because what do we do with all this data we're going to get? How do we vet it? How do we prioritize the data? Is there a room for using AI technology for things like, if all of a sudden text to 911 takes off, and I got to tell you, it's been really slow for us in Arlington. We don't have many people that use it, but what if all of a sudden that's the next thing and everybody uses it? Can we incorporate some chat bots on the front end to kind of help ask those basic questions, things like that? And then when I think about, like, the impact on the center, I'm thinking about there's things like new skill sets. So NG 911 is going to bring in new capabilities. Some of the things we're doing now brings in new capabilities. Even the remote stuff we're doing now, it requires a new skill set. So we need to think about that. And I'll just mention, too often we hear our folks who work in our centers called call processors, or thought of as simply as persons who are collecting and relaying information. And there's a lack of understanding about the fact that our folks do a lot of critical thinking and analysis now, but it's really going to explode when it comes to NG 911. Our centers are going to become just like fusion centers. And does that mean we think about new roles? So those are some of the discussions we're having, right? Do I have an expectation that a call taker is going to be ingesting, digesting, and disseminating all this information? Or do I now have a new role of a person that's sitting in there in the center? And how does this affect well-being? And I go to things like cybersecurity, and I know All Hazards Consortium just did a really fascinating webinar on cyber cloaking as a concept, right? But here's the bottom line. We've always been taught, don't accept anything and don't open anything from anybody you don't know and trust. But NG 911 breaks that rule, because it says, here comes all this data coming from no one you know, but you need to open it up, look at it, evaluate it, and then take appropriate action. So we're going to have to find the right balance in that. And so those are some of the drivers about where we're going to head. But again, a lot of unknowns, because we just don't really know yet, because it hasn't been fully deployed with all the bells and whistles and capabilities anywhere else.
Thanks for that answer, Dave. And I think in the 911 world, you cannot make one mistake. So how do you handle all that data, or handle the fear of failure as you move forward with a new concept or a new process so quickly?
Yeah, so listen, you hit a great point, right? And I think that's, like, we've got to have really good messaging with our stakeholders that we provide the service to, and the public safety responders, messaging with our constituents. And I think we got to get past this, failure is not an option. Now, we don't want the total 911 system to fail. But I think everybody's got to understand that technology is technology, and technology doesn't always work right. So what we need to do is accompany that message with, hey, here's the risks of failure, but here's things we can do to mitigate the risks. But I think the answer to that is we need to get a new risk tolerance comfort level.
Well said, Dave. Thank you so much. Eddie, I'm going to move on to you with this question.
Okay, ma'am, go ahead.
Same question. So if you have any ongoing next gen projects you can share with our listeners today.
Well, I mean, we're getting ready to deploy our EZNet on June the 17th. So we've been in queue, very much like Dave said. I mean, we've been briefing our staff here because our staff, unfortunately, those that don't understand the technology or the deployment, think that all this plethora of information is going to be, flooding into the center immediately. And, again, focusing on the personnel aspect of this, some are, cautiously, awaiting what's going to be arriving because some of them don't want to see or, the videos and the photos of all that's going on in the field.
Okay. Rose.
Fairfax County has either just achieved or about to achieve their 1-year deployment of their EZNet. And, when you talk to people like Roy Oliver and to Steve McMurray, they'll tell you that with the exception of like location accuracy and, an easier way to transfer calls, for the most part, the EZNet has been working the same as the, traditional legacy system, other than it now, of course, now being IP based and being able to, configure easier with systems. But as far as, the data coming into the center, for the most part, still remain the same. And I suspect that it's going to be that way for a couple more years. But in preparation for that, what we have to be, again, focusing on the people, we have to be prepared for the people, to have the people in place to, bring on these systems. So for 2 fiscal years now, I have put 2 full-time equivalents in the budget, just because, as we know, when we want to grow our organizations, you're never going to get the people on the first attempt to get them in the budget. So I've survived, or I have not survived 2 fiscal years of asking for 2 more positions, but I have been told that fiscal year 23 is when I'm getting those 2 people. And that'll be about perfect, because I really believe that we're going to need additional staff, because once we start to build it and start to deploy all this capability from the EZNet, it's definitely going to require some more bandwidth here in the center. I'm especially excited about the location accuracy component of NG911, because one of the things that we struggle across America in the 911 center is constantly receiving the wrong call intended for a different center. And I really, if there's been any change in Fairfax, I think the level of transfers because of calls coming into Fairfax erroneously has decreased as a result of better location accuracy that the EZNet is bringing. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really looking forward to leverage that capability.
Thanks, Eddie. And I'm fingers crossed that you get your staff as well. All right, let's move on to Alexandria for the same question. Renee?
So Dave and Eddie have pretty much said it all with the next gen and what it brings. I'm going to talk about a little bit something different in what we're preparing for with next gen, because next gen is going to bring a lot of data. And like Dave said, what are we going to do with all that data? So one of the things that we have an advantage of is having 311, and we launched 311 the month before COVID hit. And 80% of the calls that come into our 911 center are non-emergency police calls. They're parking complaints, things like that. So we created a hybrid call taker that would just focus on those non-emergency calls, so that we can keep our staffing the same on the 911 side and prepare for the next gen 911 calls that come in, the videos that come in, and all the different things that we don't even know what to expect are going to come in. So we're in the pilot phase right now, and it seems to be working very well. We're taking a lot of pressure off of 911. And so we have to continue to be creative and continue to think about, what's next. And Next Gen 911, I swear we have been talking about it forever. We have been anticipating forever, and we have not known what it's going to totally bring forever. And so what's after Next Gen 911? We need to start thinking about, okay, something else is coming, because Next Gen is here. We're starting to kind of get into it, but there's something beyond that. And I don't know what that is, but we need to be prepared for it.
Renee, have you ever, this is kind of a wild question, but have you ever thought about drone response?
Of course, I'm Walt Disney. Yes, I have thought about drone response. I've even brought it up to the city, and I didn't get turned down, but it's still kind of out there somewhere. I think it's a great idea, and I know that there are cities that are doing it.
I hope our drone listener, our drone companies are on the call today. All right, Jeff, you're up.
Hey, thanks, Laura. Getting into the next question is, I just want to state that again. There's a lot of experience sitting in this room today. So if you have any questions, stick them in the question, and we'll try to slide over there and answer some of those as we go along. So, Eddie, I'm going to ask you is that how tell us how do you integrate with each other? I mean, the three of you are very, very close. You work together all the time? Is that, how important is that partnership and does it streamline the process? How does it work?
Well, I mean, I think the collaboration and the mutual aid that we've achieved here in the National Capital Region, Jeff, is, I've never even seen another region that comes a close second. I mean, I've had the incredible privilege of being able to travel the country to many other large regions, large metropolitan areas. And what we enjoy here in the National Capital Region as a result of things like, the COG and the RPAC eyes, all these collaborative tools in a very large scale that have been in place for many, many years. I mean, I can remember going back to 25 years ago, going to COG meetings. And that level of collaboration it's just been part of our culture for many, many years here in the National Capital Region. And, our industry is no different than police and fire in that we are a very tight-knit industry. And the only way we survive is by leveraging the support and the assistance of our sister centers. I'm surrounded by 4 major counties, and on an hourly basis, we're working a mutual aid event, either on 95 or 66 with our 4 neighbors. And mutual aid for us is just an absolute necessity, and we just couldn't function without it. So because it's just been integrated, I mean, almost from day one, our new hire just realizes that, transferring a call to Fairfax or receiving a transfer from Stafford or so on and so forth is just on day one of the job. And so you just start getting indoctrinated with mutual aid and, support across county and city boundaries, that it just becomes part of our second nature. I just couldn't imagine doing our job without the incredible networking that we share amongst our peers in this industry, because we are really tight knit here in the National Capital Region. And exactly like Arlington and Alexandria are doing right now with their call processing equipment, leveraging, economies of scale and leveraging technologies so that we can all, try to stay afloat using the same standard protocol as much as possible, so that when these incredible systems like NG911 come into place, it's really easy for us to transfer a photo or a video from one PSAP to the next. And there's, the complexity lessens through economies of scales and a standards-based approach. So I'm really proud to be a part of this region.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. I just want to, a specific project that I know we're working on now is that the Border Task Force, and when I come around to Dave and Renee, I'll talk about a couple other specific projects, but what about the Border Task Force? How's that helped out? A little bit about it, and is there anything you can tell us about it?
Well, I mean, the only thing I can say about that, Jeff, is, and I know Dorothy's on the calls, and she's been, instrumental in making us, very resilient in that manner. But that border task force was a Commonwealth approach that took feedback and input from all levels, practitioners, the community, the young, the old. I mean, we literally leveraged every corner of the Commonwealth, rural Virginia, super complex Virginia. I mean, and we dissected the 911 issues to, some very finite levels of discussion. Dorothy and her staff have done an amazing job of completing an after action report of this, work group, and the lessons learned that were captured are just so meaningful. I really believe they're going to be the roadmap for, persons dabbling in 911 and trying to stay ahead, especially of avoiding any issues that always plague our industry on a regular basis, whether it's technology or human based.
Thanks, Eddie. Hey,
Yep.
Renee, let's turn it over to you, and let's talk about partnerships. And is there a key project out there that looks to the future of, it's a shining example of where we're going with the partnerships?
Jeff, if I can put you on the spot a little bit, because you pioneered this project, the no-call transfer. So you're from Alexandria. Why don't you tell us about it?
I'm the shy type over here, Renee. I
Yeah,
like
you-
sitting in
you
the back. I like to sit in the background of everything. But so the no-call transfer is that the Alexander, Arlington, and Prince William spearheaded an effort. It's currently ongoing. The kickoff's happening. Is what is called no-call transfer. Is that we know in the industry that about 25% of the public cellular calls are sent to the wrong location. So how can we manage those calls in a more efficient manner? Because if we keep transferring calls, that delays the service. So we're taking it upon. We're going to do a pilot program to take a look at in the Embers area, the Northern Virginia region area, to take a look at the anatomy of a call, what it looks like, acts like, and feels like, and can the originating agency handle the call and use technology to provide a more efficient one. And we know that from looking at all of our regional partnerships and everything, is that we're going to divide them up already. We know that emergency calls should be handled a certain way, and then non-emergency calls should be handled a certain way. And I think the industry needs to, every 911 call, they're all alike, but none of them are alike. They're all different. They all have different priorities, and they should be each handled differently. So we're going to partner up in the region and look at the no-call transfer project and how we can manage more, handle the calls efficiently. So hopefully I did that okay, Renee.
Yes, you did. You pioneered that. And so I couldn't take that away from you, and I couldn't do it any better than what you just did.
Hey, Renee and Jeff,
What?
if I could just add, I mean, for me, what that really translates into, for me, I had to chuckle when Jeff came to me with the idea, because I said, oh no, here we go, CAD to CAD 20 years ago, when that concept grew out of the weeds, and it would, people were laughing at it and get out of here, you'll never make that work, people are gonna die, the typical, horrible comments that come up at ideas that, eventually grow legs. And now we couldn't function without CAD to CAD, as an example. What I said earlier about us working mutual aid on an hourly basis with our mutual aid partners, what the no call transfer project means to me, Jeff, is in the future, rather than a caller having to talk to 2 or 3 different centers for the same incident, if I could take the call here in Prince William, enter it into my CAD system, and rather than say, now let me transfer you to Virginia State Police because that's a crash and ball, I can just transfer the call incident to Virginia State Police, without having to transfer the caller necessarily. The data would already all be there. And so because we work these mutual aid events, even if it's not to the wrong PSAP, most of the time it's multiple centers, responding to an incident. And so why have to talk to three people and have to do data entry three times when one can do it for all three and it transitions seamlessly in a standards-based approach across all of our operating systems?
Yeah, great point. Great point. And I'll turn it over to Dave real quick, but real quick, I just want to thank Laura and Tom. Is that, we talk about the private partnerships, and this is where I'm going with you, Dave, is that how important are these private partnerships? Is that I want to thank Dave and Laura for, helping us spread the word out, the All Hazards Consortium here and get to the private sector. Is that, yeah, hey, thanks, that they're a great partner. So tell us about is there projects out there or private partnerships that you want to talk about?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So first I'll add quickly. So, I think the important thing is that what it comes down to is relationships, and there's relationships at multiple levels that we benefit from. There's the very micro level, and that's the phone calls that take place between Dave and Eddie and Renee and the other folks, and they happen frequently. And then we also have a higher level. So we have a Northern Virginia PSAP directors group that meets every other month. And that's an opportunity for us to really collaborate and make sure that what we're doing is aligned with each other and making sure that we're all moving the same direction. And then there's a regional level collaboration, and that's through the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments 911 Directors Committee. And one of the things that makes that committee so valuable is that it's not just 911 directors on it, but it is those critical industry partners. So I know there's a couple of them that are on this webinar today that are part of that group, and our meeting is broken into two. The first is all presentations. So everybody who's one of our partner organizations from industry has an opportunity to tell us what's going on and hear from us what our concerns are. That's critical because we do have a lot going on. Eddie mentioned we had CAD to CAD, and we all knew that when it was deployed in the mid 2000s that it was supposed to be a Band-Aid, and here it is 15 something years later, and we still have the Band-Aid, but thank God we have that Band-Aid, right? We also use CAD to GIS for information sharing. You just heard Renee and Jeff talk about the no-call transfer program. At the regional level, we have a huge project going on for call abandonment, call overflow because of EZNet, right? So we know EZNet will allow us to move calls from one center to the other, but there's got to be some framework with it. So, in doing all that, and especially in making sure that it works right, those private partnerships are critical. I can't underscore how important they are. But let me just say this, and thank you for opening the doorway for this, Jeff. What we need is partnerships, not sales pitches. We need folks that want to come to us and work with us. And you know what? The sale may come down the road, but we need the partnership conversation first. Also, we understand that you've got to make profit as a company. But this, and especially in light of framing it back into our overall conversation of COVID, this was about continuity of operations and public safety. And I will tell you that among myself and my colleagues, there were times that we felt like maybe there was a couple companies out there taking advantage of the fact that we were in a little bit of a bind and we needed stuff fast. And I wouldn't go so far as to say price gouging, but what we needed was to understand that we get it, you got to make money, but public safety is not going to be a strong profit line for you. So we just ask for industry to be reasonable. And the other thing that I would ask is from the private industry side, don't work against each other. We've done a lot of work to create standards, and that's how interoperability is going to continue. But when proprietary mechanisms within the confines of those standards occur, it defeats interoperability. So, again, each one of these projects that Eddie and Renee and Jeff and I have mentioned, there is a strong private industry component with it. And, I'm pleased to say, again, the folks that I see on this call today that we worked with have been phenomenal in helping us work through and get to where we need to go.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for that last one. Yeah, it's yeah, we get it. I mean, we've been in the private sector. We get it. We totally understand that, everybody's got everybody's got to do it, but we've got to and I appreciate the partnerships of outside and all the things that we're doing in the region, and the no call transfer and the carrier notifications and the nurse triage, and I could just keep going on with the laundry list in here. But I think we're trying to get ahead of the industry and partner with the industry and trying to say, hey, look, we need change. We need help changing. And oh, by the way, sometimes we need help thinking about things. Is that we need that industry to help us think about, well, as we think outside the box, is, hey, can this really happen? And like the remote call taking. Is that, can it really happen? Oh, well, yeah, it did happen. It really did. And it happened in this region because of a lot of the leaders you see sitting in front of you that weren't, hey, we need to do this to protect our people. So,
Hey, Jeff,
yeah.
this time, let me pull on a thread real quick. Dave, you teed up, and I think Renee and Eddie alluded to it. As data begins to flow, there's going to be a whole new set of partnerships that will develop from not the private sector vendor community, of which I was part of, right? But I'm talking about the infrastructure owner and operator. They are looking every minute for real-time information. I'm thinking about this for a minute. If you're trying to do damage assessment in an area, who's going to have the best data for what trees are down, what power lines are, you with me? The utilities have one set of data. The states, really the counties, have the other side, right? And I will almost bet there's going to be another whole other level of partnerships you all develop that could be even bigger than the ones you have when you're dealing with people that are looking for information real time at the ground level to protect their people or their assets. That's a space we work in. I can tell you it's huge. And what's missing is what you all will be having is that, I'm talking about nationally, not just within the national capital region, is that real-time data on specific things, not all things, but on specific things that would impact my employees, my infrastructure, or my ability to get to some place around the debris or the flood or whatever. So I want to encourage you guys to do phenomenal work. I think the best is yet to come, because that data piece is really, really going to be a big one. Some of it's sensitive, you can't share, but other that stuff can be shared. But I think the private sector has information they can share with you guys to make the situational awareness increase for everybody. So
Yeah.
I just made some notes on this, Dave. I'm going to circle back with you all on this offline, but I just think there's a great opportunity, and it's the innovation you all have done. It's been phenomenal. Just really great.
Hey, Tom, and if I could just add a tail piece to that, I don't think we can underestimate the power that we can harness from the collaboration with the community. So last month, I launched 3 social media platforms here at Prince William County 911, and I built a team of 6. So they're telecommunicators, but yet we also gave them formal training on being social media specialists. And so, we went live, and almost immediately we had a bunch of followers. And then we started, leveraging some good success stories in two-way communication with our community. We were broadcasting road closures because, at 2 in the morning, when you want to, notify the community of, a power outage or a road closed or some flooding, the police and the fire PIOs, they're not on duty at those hours, but yet I've got, telecommunicators here on duty that have access to 3 social media platforms that we can instantly put out information. Oh, and guess what? Now that they're aware that we're putting out good information, now they're sending us good information, eyes on the street, pictures, videos of things that not only is it a call for service, now we're getting it in from a social media aspect. So leveraging your partnerships, either private sector for a commercial, that is absolutely a key to success. I've
Yeah.
witnessed that.
And especially, Eddie, if you're a trusted source of information, you know, the
Yeah.
utilities companies, they don't really know about whether they can trust social media or not. But I think there's a way to vet people to be a approved,
Yeah.
911's approved, you know, social media person, because it's all about, can I trust this data? And there's no question social media is powerful, but can I trust it? And I think that's where you all have a real opportunity to build that trusted crowdsourcing, because it's just not fully understood or tapped yet.
Well, the other thing also, Tom, and this is my last comment, is it's got to be timely, because if you
Right.
wake up at 6 in the morning, and that's when the police or the fire PIO put out their press release on road closures or flooding, well, that's 4 hours old information. Today's society wants it live and on the spot, and that's where you get your real leverage to trusted information sourcing, is when you're putting out meaningful and timely information to the community.
Agreed.
So Tom, you just witnessed one of our brainstorming sessions, is that we get together and go to think about, oh, here we go, we're going to think way outside the box, is that, we've got data to come in, and who is it, and how does it come in, and where we're going to put it, and hey, oh, by the way, oh, okay, hey, let's name it something, and we're going to call it, hey, no call transfer, and look what happens, or remote call taking, look what happens. You're going through a brainstorming session of hey, all great ideas. How do you bring that data in? And then at the end of the day, all about our customer service, is that how can we help the people? So with that being said, I'm going to open it up and say, hey, looking forward, what's next? What are we doing next? Even though I don't want any more projects or anything, I'm good for a second. So what is next, and what do we need to do to make it happen? So anybody want to tackle it first? Dave, Renee, Eddie, or?
Well, Jeff,
okay,
I'll just
I know. There we go, Dave. I knew Dave was gonna. Yeah.
I was waiting.
Yeah, I won't be shy. So listen, like, what's next is actually what's now. The first thing I gotta tell you, man, the word is virtualization. COVID was the nail in the coffin of the government-owned server for our center. Especially with remote operations, I need efficient access anytime, anywhere for any authorized person. Our remote operation that we started, we want to move from using it responsive to maybe a great example is the incident that occurred across the river on January 6th from us. And we watched our call volume start to spike, and we could immediately reach out. And within a matter of moments, we had 6 people sitting in their houses taking phone calls. We want to move from ad hoc to this is business as usual, right? So a person, and by the way, think about the implications in being able to hire somebody, because they don't have to live near me now. I still need them to come to my center maybe once every 2 weeks, maybe once a month, but they could live in West Virginia and take calls from me. So, building on our remote capabilities. What's next? Looking at the changing role of our 911 center. Jeff, I think you mentioned the medical triage, right? Behavioral health triage. Those are 2 sets of folks that are now going to be integrated, behavioral already, medical triage in the near future in my center. My center is not going to be call takers, dispatchers anymore. It's now going to be specialists in these that calls get triaged over to, and they handle those things. So to address, what do I need? And I'm going to jump on Renee's bandwagon. I'm sure she's going to follow up. From a federal level, there's 2 things desperately that we need. We need recognition of what our employees do. As I said earlier, they're not call processors. They're analysts. They are medical people who are providing medical direction to callers for medical related calls, right? We need the proper recognition of what our people do in a proper classification. The second is funding from the federal level, the $12 billion that's on the table for NG 911 to help build out a standardized, unified, functional, not NG 911 system. And when I say system, it's not just EZNet, it's the components that go with it. We also need good messaging, that came up earlier, right? It's really good messaging with our stakeholders, with our public, with our industry partners. And then the last thing that I would say is, what do we need moving forward is we need to reevaluate well-being in our centers, especially a concern as I think about remote and virtual operations. The work-life balance becomes a completely different issue when life becomes work. I'm sorry, when home becomes work, right? If you're working from home in a remote status, all the things that we worry about in terms of well-being for our 911 employees, maybe I need to worry about the fact that they're now in a not directly supervised environment. What are the implications of that? But to go back, I think the key thing is virtualization and going into leveraging into cloud technologies and not be dependent on a server that I have that sits in a building somewhere anymore.
All right, Renee.
Let's see. Moving forward, I think I want to pound the pavement and make sure that, like Dave said, we are recognized as true first responders. And it's very important that we focus on the infrastructure. And I think that people are so used to just picking up the phone and calling 911 and having that service arrive, that they don't know or understand all that goes into that one call. It's people working overnight. It's a lot of money in technology. It's building relationships. It is so much that goes into that one call that it's not as easy as just calling and they show up and the right people show up. So I think just kind of making industry, the community more aware of what we actually do. People just think we just pick up the phone. And I've heard it time and time again, all you do is answer the phone. No, it's a lot going into that. A couple of years ago, we created a position going to what Tom was talking about, and we called it a watch officer. And that position was designed to absorb all the information around the region so that we would have all that information. We still have the position, but we still need to do a lot of tweaking with it. And we need industry. We need our vendors. We need each other. And I know that we're running out of time, so I'm going to let Eddie talk or Tom talk or someone else talk besides Dave and I.
So,
Laura,
Jeff, really
you
the
want
only
to?
thing I-
Oh, go ahead, Eddie. No, go ahead.
No, just very quickly, I was just going to add, it's kind of hard to top what Dave and Renee have already piped up. But on my end, when we're talking about, future projects and how we're going to change the industry, coming up at, like APCO and NENA coming up, I just really want to push the industry on the call processing equipment side to, as much as possible, try to leverage our future call processing equipment to mirror and match the smartphone capabilities of the communities that we serve. I mean, our call processing equipment, for the most part, is so antiquated and so limited with its capability. Yet I see, 7 and 8-year-olds manipulating a smartphone so effectively, so efficiently. They want to show us a picture of their mom not breathing. They want to show us a picture of the broken, glass in the back door where they just got broken into. And the location accuracy component that the private sector, enjoys so effectively, when you're ordering a pizza and it comes to the right apartment, but yet we can't get an ambulance to the right complex, let alone to the right door. And so working with our call processing equipment vendors, I really think that if we can enhance that one silo of technology in the PSAP, that'll make a huge difference, because we know that smartphones have unlimited capability, when it comes to sending you information. When you're talking to someone that only speaks a foreign language and they're trying to send you an emoji on text to 911, and an emoji, not even a basic emoji, can come over on text to 911, but 160 characters in English can, but except that person doesn't speak English, you're at a roadblock. It doesn't matter that you have to text to 911. You can't communicate with that person because they don't understand English and they can't write in English. So to me, the real future for enhancing capability in the center is to making our call processing equipment as equivalent and resilient as, every single smartphone that's out there.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm going to turn it over to Laura in a second. Is, the insight behind the four people you've seen in front of you is that, all of us started in the law enforcement community. Well, and now you have every single one of us saying the same thing, is that call takers and dispatchers are the first of the first responders. That should say something. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Jeff, thank you. And I have one last question in the little bit of time we have left. And I'll start with you, Renee. If you were to give one bit of advice to the listeners on the line today, and you've seen the attendee list, a good mix of call centers, providers, etc., what would you tell them?
I'm a people person, and it's about the people. And if we put too much technology before we recognize the people, as far as being first responders, we're doing them an injustice. If we put the technology first, they'll never get it. We've been doing that over and over and over again. We put the technology first and expect them to do all these different things, and we still don't recognize them. So let's put them first and then the technology.
Very good. Dave, any words of wisdom from you?
Yeah, so along with Renee's theme, it's relationships, right? And it's networking, and it's knowing who you can ask and where you can ask, and maintaining that awareness, and don't be shy, ask. Number one. Number two, going back to what I said earlier, get comfortable with a new world of risk and be willing to be bold. And if you try something and it doesn't work, that's great. That's something that probably would make the next iteration even stronger.
Well said, Dave. Thank you. And Eddie.
Man, Laura, it's tough to follow those two. I mean, the peril with going last is that everybody steals your thunder.
I know.
No, but I mean, I think for me, yeah, same. I'm just continuously focusing on my staff and my personnel, making sure they get the proper recognition, the proper compensation, the proper training. And then I think, the generation that we're hiring today as, telecommunicators, dispatchers, they're very, very smart people. And you need to start involving them early on in the conversation of procurements and planning, because they're the tip of the spear who knows, what's happening out there on the floor. And, sometimes I think we do ourselves an injustice when you have 25, 30-year-old, crusty guys like Dave, Renee, and I making decisions, and we really haven't invoked the thoughts and the feedback from the tip of the spear. And so that's my other recommendation. Lately, I've just been bringing some of my sharpest, newest call takers and dispatchers onto committees, and just letting them, tell me, what do you need? And, allowing them to help guide our direction within the center, because that's the future of our industry. And we need to start getting them involved in the procurement and in the planning process of our organizations as early as possible.
That's an excellent answer, Eddie. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, Renee, Jeff, Dave, and Eddie. Appreciate your time. If any of our listeners have any questions, now's the time to enter it into the Q&A. And I do have a couple here, just real quickly. If one of your dispatch centers or incoming lines suffered a sudden loss of service, or an event triggered an overwhelming increase in calls, can you transfer those calls to a neighboring jurisdiction? How do you provide redundancy? Who wants to take that?
So Laura, I'll start with that. And that is, right now, we do not have the capability to transfer to other centers, because unfortunately, the only other center that would, probably be big enough to take our volume would be like Fairfax. And we just don't have that relationship in place yet. But we do have relationships with our secondary PSAPs that are within our county to send some of their volume here to us. So we can receive, we just can't send, unfortunately. But one of the things that, like Renee and Dave and I have done is just stand up your backup center so that it's hot all the time, so that when you have a situation like that, you can send out that immediate alert, have additional people come in, and within an hour or so, you can have your backup center stood up and start taking on the volume yourself without having to rely on your neighbor at this point.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eddie. Another question.
Hey,
we
Laura,
had
can I,
was- yeah, go ahead.
Laura, I just want to tackle that real quick. We saw in like the big, large incidents like Nevada, is that, overwhelming is going to be overwhelming. You can't handle it. One of the things that we always say, and we want to make sure that everybody understands, is stay on the line, stay on the line, stay on the line. Don't hang up, because you'll go right back to the end of the line. Is that, hopefully we're going to get to the calls as soon as we can. So don't hang up and call back again. It's just hang on there and we'll try to get to you.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, we have another quick question here. When you do text 911, is that answered by a live operator, or does it? Do you have a bot that asks questions, responds?
For us, we it's a live operator. We don't currently have bots that answer.
Yeah, same for us. 911 text is answered by a live operator, and it comes in the same mode as a phone call. It gets right in queue, just like the next phone call ringing.
Okay, great. And that looks like it's the only questions that we received. So again, thank you to all of you guys for providing this information. Very helpful, very interesting. And I'm so glad we were able to share this with our listeners today. All Hazards runs regular webinars, and we'll be sure to send those to you. And just a note for your calendar, on January 25th to the 27th, 2022 is our second annual 3-day Business Resiliency Summit, which will be virtual again this year. So note your records. I also want to give you my email address at laura.johnson@ahcusa.org in case you have any questions, interested in providing any webinars, or need to get in touch with any of our speakers today. I'd like to thank all of you for attending, for listening. We'll be sure to send you the link. And in the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Laura, for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.